Hi, friends. I'm Scott Giles, and welcome to Power Talk, my podcast here on Facebook Live and YouTube. I cover topics related to spirituality, hypnotic coaching, and the hypnotic arts and sciences in general. If you'd like to know more about my professional work or sign up for my free e-newsletter, Power Lines, check out my website, which I'll tag at the end of this video. Well, today I want to talk about whether or not people have free will. This is a classic in philosophy called one of the great problems of human thought. We experience ourselves as being able to make decisions, so we think we have free will. But it's an indisputable fact that just about everything has a cause, so there's a cause behind every decision we make. Well, if our decisions are actually caused by something else, then free will is an illusion. This is called the philosophical proposition of causal determinism. That is, if everything is actually determined or caused by something else, then free will isn't free. Now, it's a fascinating thing to ponder because we don't feel like our decisions are determined. But scientists and philosophers argue that a lot of our decisions are. And historically, there have been some aspects of this that have gotten into popular thought. Someone dies, and people will say, well, it was their time, or he was successful because of his karma or fate. Well, if it's possible that things happen to a person because of fate, previous decisions, or other forces acting on the person, then how do we know that everything isn't determined in some way? But there's a huge moral problem with determinism because if everything is caused by something else, how can we hold anyone responsible for what they do? If a guy cheats on his girlfriend, is it really an adequate excuse for him to say he had no choice because his wandering ways were predetermined by other things he had no control over? And would that same excuse be satisfactory as a get out of jail free card for a murderer, a terrorist, or a war criminal? And that's the problem with the claim that people may not have free will. Because if they don't, then morality, right versus wrong, law breaking, promise keeping lose their meaning. As philosopher Immanuel Kant pointed out, we experience ourselves as having free will. There may in fact be things that impinge on our ability to make choices, but it's important that we believe that we do, otherwise morality has no meaning. And life would become a Hobbesian war of all against all, where everyone plays for their self-interest and acknowledge no rules. Now, all this has recently come to the fore because Stanford scientist Robert Sapolsky has published a book entitled Determined, A Science of Life Without Free Will, where he argues there is no free will. He proposes that after 40 years of studying primate behavior, that all human behavior, or just about all, is caused by forces beyond our conscious control. We are no more responsible for the moral choices we make than we are about getting cancer or being hit by a meteor. This is a quote. The world is really screwed up and made much, much more unfair by the fact that we reward people and punish people for things they have no control over. We've got no free will. Stop attributing stuff to us that isn't there, unquote. Now, he's kind of an outlier in his belief that we have no, or at most very little, free will. Most neuroscientists and philosophers argue that we are not absolutely determined. Yeah, a lot of what we do is coping with things we have no control over. Health, family influences, physical abilities, or illness. But within those limits, we do have the capacity for meaningful choice. I can't do anything about the fact that I grew up in a neglectful home, and that has surely influenced me. But for all that, I still decided to marry Lindsay, to go into spiritual work, to become a hypnotist, and so on. The claim in Sapolsky's book is that every neuron in our brain is influenced by things that are beyond its control. And as with the part, so with the whole. Every decision we make is influenced by things that are beyond the decision maker's control. While we experience ourselves as making free choices about many things, in fact, that choice is anything but free. Our biology, upbringing, race, social setting all play a role. As an educated, reasonably successful white cis guy living in Illinois, I experience very different options than someone living in repression or in poverty or in a war zone. And were I in any of those other circumstances, I would no doubt make very different decisions about a whole lot of things. Now, the goal of his argument is to increase interpersonal compassion, and that's a praiseworthy goal. We should treat the murderer, the drug addict, the criminal, or the co-worker who cheated us with more compassion, recognizing that, at least to some degree, the choices they made were determined by something other than the simple desire to kill, to escape reality, or get ahead. He argues that there should be no such thing as blame, only coping and compassion. And I get that, but I don't agree. Now, my take on this goes back to one of the very first philosophy books I read as a freshman at the University of Connecticut by David Hume, an 18th century philosopher who's been very influential. Hume stood for clear definitions and clear explanations. Hume argued that I may have an intention to do something. For example, I may intend to have a romantic relationship. How I implement that intention is determined by my circumstances. If I'm in modern Illinois, I may fire up a dating app and start swiping left to right or whatever it is. On the other hand, if I was part of a conservative Hindu family or an ultra-Orthodox Jewish family, I would start by visiting a marriage broker asking to have an arranged marriage set up. I have an intention, but very different behaviors result from that same intention based upon my external circumstances. But the thing is, I have the intention. I come up with that. Now, where does it come from? Well, it's absolutely true that my intention to have a romantic relationship is itself determined by some external circumstances, but not absolutely. To unpack this a bit, I live in a society where such relationships are common. If I were instead adopted as an infant and raised in a medieval monastery with celibate monks, I might never have formulated such an intention at all. So there is a sense in which my intention itself is influenced, if not outright determined, by external factors. However, to declare that as proof that there is no free will is to miss the point. It's trivial to say that everything is influenced by everything else. If I grew up in a monastery, it might well lead me to decide to intend a celibate life rather than a non-celibate one. However, influence is not a guarantee. I might choose to be celibate, or I might feel really horny and sneak out of the cloister and visit a hooker in town. My intentions will be influenced by all manner of things, some contradictory, from my level of testosterone to my degree of religious faith to how good a lock there is on the monastery door. but I'm still making decisions among my options based on my circumstances because of an intent that I formulated. I am choosing the options I select based on what I want, and that's free choice. My choices are influenced for sure, but influence is not determination. For all anyone might know, I could have been a randy lad who had a key to the monastery door, but still decided to be celibate rather than visit the hooker. It is impossible to know what choices I would have made simply by examining my external circumstances. And because it's not possible to examine those circumstances and predict, free will has meaning. If we could examine a person's circumstances and accurately predict their behavior, then it would be clear that there is no free will. However, we can't do that. So the concept of free will has meaning. Within the limited sphere of what's possible for us, we can choose. Yeah, the choices we make will be influenced, perhaps by competing influences. For example, high testosterone, poor locks versus religious devotion. But I get to choose which of those influences wins. And so long as I get to choose among the competing influences in the formulation of my intent, free will has meaning. Hey, thank you for your time and attention today. I'll be back next week with another talk on a different subject. You are invited. It helps me a lot if you let others know about my work and my videos, so please like, share, and subscribe. And if I can be of help to you, don't hesitate to reach out, and have a great week.